How the hell do I even begin to review Hamilton? I'm not even going to try to cover up the fact that I'm already a huge fan of this show, and I think that this filmed version of the original Broadway cast is absolutely phenomenal. That being said, I am still one of many people who still haven't seen this amazing show live. Even to this day. I haven't been able to go to New York to see it, and when it's come to my own city with its touring company, it's either completely sold out with no tickets available, or tickets are just crazy expensive, or outside my budget, or a combination of both. That being said, I didn't go into this new movie completely blind to it. To be fair, I was introduced to the soundtrack the instant it came out, and I listened to the entire thing over and over again because of how amazing it was. And I will admit that I have seen clips and pirated video segments of this show in an effort to scratch my itch to see the real thing because I wanted to see it so badly. So I was already familiar with most of the show aesthetics and staging, but my God, did this show and this professionally filmed version of it impress the hell out of me. And I'm going to break it down without spoilers, but in a very specific way. Rather than go on just a fangirl rant about how much I love the show, I'm going to review this movie in a way to appeal specifically to the naysayers or skeptics who haven't seen or aren't interested in seeing Hamilton. My goal is to break this down for you and give you a reason why you should check this show out and why I think it's definitely worth your time. Now, to be clear, Disney and everyone involved is referring to this filmed version as a movie, but it's really just the full show as it's performed in its theater on Broadway and by the original cast members, but it's professionally shot and edited together for your easy viewing experience at home. So just to clarify, and while I'll refer to this movie as a show, since I think it's more technically accurate to call it a show. Now, this musical is all about the nation's founding fathers, and specifically Alexander Hamilton and his journey as an immigrant who goes on to serve George Washington during the Revolutionary War, and then showing his impact in shaping our country as we know it. Along with George Washington, this show also covers Hamilton's firsthand experiences with other founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and many others. And there is an unconventional marriage of classic American history mixed with 21st century hip-hop and rap, and that's how this musical sets itself apart from any other show. Now, I was never a history buff, nor did I find the subject of history in school all that fascinating to me, but the way that they combine history with modern type hip-hop music and rap honestly made me that much more interested to learn and experience this show. And it actually made me enjoy learning about history. I get that there are those that love history, but it just never excited me. But this show hooked me in. The lyrics are 100% modern with 21st century dialogue, but with all the costumes and settings and backdrops of the late 1700s. Now, one key thing to know going into this is that this musical is non-stop singing the entire time with just a couple sentences of dialogue, but the music itself, like I said, is very modern, very 21st century, easy to follow dialogue, funny at times, smart, but accessible and clear enough to keep you engaged, but also able to follow along pretty easily. I never felt like the music ever overstayed its welcome because so many of the songs are so different that it never feels like a broken record. Now, this musical delivers some of the best and most imaginative, practical staging effects that I've ever seen. The show doesn't change the backdrop, nor does it have ornate stage changes to distinguish different locations. However, there are parts of the stage that rotate, and with the actors even standing on them many times, and sometimes this was used ingeniously to depict time moving. But the show heavily relies and succeeds at utilizing the actors with some, smaller stage props to illustrate the scene change, and it was meticulous where every single stage member contributed in such creative ways where I totally bought the changes in scenes as this show takes place over the span of several years. And this can also be said about the practical effects, and one of my favorites was how they depicted a bullet flying through the air when a gun was shot. There was a couple times where they completely relied on an actor to depict how this bullet was flying through the air, and sometimes in slow motion. It sounds silly when I just say it like that, but when you see how they convey that while only using a cast member and their specific movements, it blew my mind, and it was hands down my favorite practical effect that I saw on stage. Also, the choreography is everything, and the show heavily relies on its dancers many times, and honestly made me a little exhausted just to see what was physically required of so many people on that stage and in full costume. Very impressive dancing on top of non-stop singing and constantly shifting the stage and scene setups around. Now, this show has so many elements to hook different people. Not only do you have music that ranges from hip-hop, rap, R&B, and pop, but there's also comedy and some hilarious moments. There's suspense and tension, especially in scenes that depict the battlefield during the war. There's romance, and there's sex and scandal, without going too graphic, of course. There's the bonds of friendship and brotherhood, and there's sorrow and loss of life. I cried a few times during this show, and the energy never lets up. This show is not slow, it's far from boring, and the music is fast-paced. Now, I know that this show is long. It's a whopping 2 hours and 40 minutes long, but the upside to this being on Disney Plus is that you have the ability to pause and take a break. It's a song from the show, but the ability to pause and take a break whenever you need to. I argue that the show is entertaining enough where you aren't going to want to stop it, but there is also a brief intermission if you're looking for an actual good stopping point in the middle of the show. Given that the show is non-stop singing, I will say that it did help me to follow the story along because I had listened to the soundtrack and easily could sing along to so many of the songs already. But for those who haven't seen or heard it before, I could understand if you might miss just a few song lyrics or have trouble hearing a couple different interactions, since there is a lot of quick back and forth rap numbers. I don't think it's too hard to follow at all, but you do have the convenient option of subtitles to help you if needed. But this show is also visually engaging, so I argue that you could make sense of the story even if pieces of lyrics get missed throughout for you. Now, this show was shot about 3 different times and from a few different camera angles, all edited together to create a cinematic viewing experience. So this takes it well beyond the front row experience if you were to see it in a live theater. Because in this case, you get close-ups of actors' faces, you get aerial shots, you get side shots, and you even get shots from the back of the stage, and you're never missing anything. In fact, I argue that all of these different camera angles only allow you to see everything on stage, and maybe even some things you couldn't normally see. The cinematography is also smart and doesn't take away from the far shots that are essential in order to see the entire stage and ensemble during big song numbers. It's strategic camera work, and it keeps you hooked and narrowed in on the action throughout, and it was seamless. In talking about the performers themselves, to be clear, everyone does an impeccable job in every role. There's not one bad actor, nor is there any waste of any role. That being said, there are a few that definitely stood out to me just a little bit more than others, and they are Daveed Diggs. Now, disclaimer, there are a few actors that play multiple roles, but they're good about making it clear what role that they're playing on stage. Now, as for Daveed Diggs, he plays 2 roles, but his second role of Thomas Jefferson specifically was electric, hilarious, charismatic, and was a real scene stealer. And the next standout for me was Jonathan Groff as King George. And even though he wasn't on stage as much, his scenes were hands down the funniest and had me busting up laughing every single time. If there was ever a vote for a crowd favorite, I'd argue that it would be a toss-up between the characters of Thomas Jefferson or King George. Other standouts for me would be Renee Elise Goldsberry, who plays Hamilton's sister-in-law, Angelica, and has one of the best songs in the entire show, in my humble opinion. And then, of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda as Hamilton himself. It's astounding how this guy wrote this entire show, including the music, and is also carrying it as the lead role. He's relatable, captivating, emotional, and pours his heart into every single scene so meticulously and deliberately. Now again, since this show is nonstop singing, there are so many songs to pick from if I were to narrow down my favorites, but my top favorite song numbers alone, regardless of the stage setup, is Satisfied, My Shot, The Schuyler Sisters, It's Quiet Uptown, and Alexander Hamilton, the opening number. However, if I were to list my favorite songs based on the visuals on the stage and how they were showcased, my top favorites probably would have to be My Shot, Yorktown, Burn, Satisfied, and Wait For It. Finally, I want to end this review by saying that Hamilton is also an important musical because it features such a diverse cast where the importance of the message and education around our history and our freedom, democracy, and its relevance to this day is what's most important, regardless of your skin color or race. It's both fluid and potent in its symbolism and relatability to our nation even now. But it also shines that spotlight on our history in a way that I've never seen done before, and in a way that I actually connected with. It takes a different level of talent and genius to conceive a musical like this. This is nothing like The Phantom of the Opera, it's nothing like Wicked, nor is it anything like Book of Mormon. It's something entirely unique and a far cry from any traditional musical you may have seen. I argue that this show could almost count as an event film, something that everyone should see at least once because of its cultural impact and significance alone. This show will live on in history books in terms of cultural influences. It's that good and that important. And thankfully, now you have the chance to see it for yourself on Disney+. And as dark of a time as we live in now, I can't think of a better time to bring this show into our homes to shine some light. So don't throw away your shot at seeing this movie and experiencing it for yourself, because I argue that this is a piece of cinematic history that you won't want to miss. I'm going to give Hamilton an A. And that's my review of Hamilton for you, and I can't recommend this movie enough. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I'd be curious to hear what your favorite songs are if you've already seen it, so feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, thank you all again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Ryan Bamey, signing off. Bye, everyone.